worries and critiques, frankly, that qualitative researchers deal with is this idea that our research is not statistically generalizable, and therefore it is limited and not as valuable as quantitative research. And even in limitation sections, you'll see people who have done this beautiful qualitative study and then at the end say, well, but unfortunately it wasn't generalizable. Well, first of all, what do we even mean by generalizability? Statistical generalizations mean that you take a random sample from a smaller group so that then it can transfer and be generalizable to the population at large. And usually qualitative research doesn't do this, just because we're more focused on depth rather than breadth. But just because we do not statistically generalize does not mean that we do not have resonance. So resonance, I've used this term and I define it as this: the research influences, impacts, or moves particular readers or audiences. You can still do resonance in a number of different ways, and oftentimes better ways, through qualitative research. So here is resonance, and one way you can do that is through aesthetic merit. And that is writing beautifully. When I think of some of my friends, especially those that are really active in autoethnography, people like Chris Poulos, Tony Adams, Gillian Toulis, Robin Boylorn, Art Bachner Ellis, Carolyn Ellis, those folks really write so beautifully and so evocatively that you find yourself in this story and therefore are moved yourself. And indeed, you might find, think about a time that you've read a novel or watched a movie that you have been moved to change your opinion or changed your behavior because of that. You can also do resonance through naturalistic generalization or transferable findings. Again, this is oftentimes done by writing so thickly or writing in so much thick description that you lose yourself and you can put yourself in that situation and then naturalistically generalize to your own situation. For instance, when I read Hochschild's work early on in terms of emotional labor, she wrote in so much detail about the Delta flight attendants and about the bill collectors that I was able to see how emotional work could also make sense and help me understand why teaching was sometimes difficult. And then finally, we have up here, I should also mention in terms of transferable findings, you can do some work in the conclusion section of parameter setting, and we'll get into that in another video, but this is where you tell the reader, you give them the parameters in which the findings that you came up with could be helpful for them or not helpful for them. And then finally, critical incident sampling. Critical incident sampling is a specific way to sample so that you have the most likely or least likely of a group involved in your sample. And if the claim that you make for that group is true, then you can make a logical deduction to the rest of the group. And we'll get into more detail on that in a future video. So just keep in mind that there's lots of ways to move and impact people through resonance. There's more on this in my article, Qualitative Quality, 8 Big Tent Criteria for Excellent Qualitative Research. And you don't need to have so much heartburn like this little dude here on whether you are statistically generalizing.